So, we're here to talk about the power of psychology in employer branding. And I've got just the person with me today to chat about that. Hi, Fergus. How you doing?
Hey, Chris. Not too bad. Good to chat to you. Always happy to talk about psychology and try and link that to employer branding as much as I can. I'll do my best.
Yeah, good man. Good man. Let's a bit of an introduction about yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself.
So, where to start? So, Fergus, born in the UK, but I would say identify as Irish, otherwise my family may ostracize me. I've been living over here for the last 9 years. Have a background in sports. I played pretty high level competitive tennis growing up,
Nice.
which is probably where my interest of psychology initially started. If you'd asked me about 20, 25 years ago, would I be sitting on a podcast talking about psychology and the world of employer branding? I would say probably not. I would hope to be talking about the world of psychology and high level sport, which was always the plan. I did a degree in psychology at university, then did a master's in performance psychology with the goal of going into sports psychology. But about halfway through the master's, I realized that only about 0.1% of people who play sport ever avail of someone or even think about probably psychological principles when they're competing. So kind of pivoted pretty quickly to the world of business. My godfather owned a recruitment company, and I remember having a conversation with him, and he was saying, don't worry about sport, recruitment. Everyone who studies psychology gets into recruitment in one way or another. He wasn't that wrong, really. Obviously, adjacent industry, employer branding, work a lot with recruitment. So yeah, kind of here I am, 22nd of August, chatting to you.
Oh, brilliant. Good man. Well, I think as typically happens with this podcast, is that there are some conversations being had related to an episode that I did a few months back, and I know Mark, I think, tagged you in it or suggested that I contact you about it, and it was talking about the thing that started that was about talking about what things you can study or what things you need to kind of get your head around to be good at this job of many jobs in employer branding. So when it comes to psychology, it's of course it's massively important, isn't it? Given the subject, it's about relationships, surely.
Yeah, I think if I remember back, even one of the things I was always told playing sport growing up, and obviously tennis being an individual sport, but also played a lot of other ones, was kind of the thing about psychology is trying to understand someone else's perspective as much as your own, so you can try and, I suppose, create empathy, but also then have an edge in what you're doing. So understanding what your competitor is doing so that you can kind of elevate what you're doing. So I think one of the key things, as you said, relationships incredibly important, but also I suppose the thing I always think about when we're in the world of branding, advertising, etc., is you see it so often where it's business out or company projecting or broadcasting a message or broadcasting something that someone wants to hear or broadcasting your own point of view, which in reality, what psychology can teach you is go actually think of the other person first. And I suppose that empathy, that care, that, I suppose there may be even two soft words, but that understanding of the other point of view is something that I think everyone who's in our space, branding, advertising, recruitment, marketing, whatever you want to call it, I think that ability to think outside of your own perspective is something that I think psychology teaches you really, really well.
What kind of things as well? Let's go into those things that psychology teaches you, can teach you if you're wanting to get into it.
Well, I think empathy is probably the first one, and the ability to empathize with another's situation. So whether that be, even if you think about it from an employer branding perspective, if someone you might be a big multinational organization putting out a brand message, but the people that you're communicating with may have lost their job, another may be looking for a new job, another may have moved to a new city. So that empathy to think of the different audiences that you're connected with. So I think empathy is a big one, and the ability to be resilient, I think, is really important. I think don't take no for an answer. I think resilience is something that we talk about a lot in the business world, and the ability to understand how to flow a conversation. So the ability to take someone from point A to point B, but tell the story to get there. And I think understanding the drivers of those people. So what are those motivations, behaviors, attitudes that someone may have, so that you can then know what you're saying, what you're doing is tapping into something that they might not even know about. So it might be subconscious bias that they have. It might be something subconscious that you've identified from a conversation. So be it that ability to be perceptive when you're engaging with people. I think it can teach you a lot of that by understanding the underlying things that drive us all as human beings aren't necessarily the actual product itself, but maybe the association that a product may have or the association we want to have with a brand. Because it really tries to tap into something deeper than just the surface level things that you may see every day.
Those things you talk about are relevant both when it comes to the actual creation of employer branding, positioning statements, identity, experiences, but also when it comes to actually working with people to get that work done, understanding clients, asking the right questions. You know, a number of times when I've spoken to, psychologists that I've known over the years, and, a big thing is about asking questions, asking the right questions, and then to get the answer, so you can really then tailor something for what they actually need.
I think one of the things, so those who know me well would probably say I probably talk too much, but also the ability to know when not to talk, the ability to know when to let others talk, the ability to know actually the dynamic in a room. And some of it is basic, like kind of social psychology. It's the art of understanding the positions that different people take within a room, whether it's the desire to want to be the loudest person in the room or the ability to be a reflector, and understanding how different people work together can help in shaping great teams to deliver great work. And obviously in our world, being an agency side, shaping the right team around a client is incredibly important. It's not just about the skill set that someone has. It's about understanding what type of person may be best suited to a high growth tech company versus a large FMCG that might move a little bit slower in the way that they work. And that's all psychology. It's all understanding of people. It's all two people with the exact same degree, the exact same skill set, and the exact same experience may handle two situations completely differently, just based on, I suppose, the deeper things that actually drive them, motivate them, their personality characteristics. So I think it's about, the social element that psychology teaches you, and big fan of social psychology, and kind of the group dynamics then at play within that can help us shape teams in the best way, both inside a business, but also working with clients or with any partners as well.
That's when you talk about this kind of stuff, it's, a phrase that comes into my mind is, we need to understand the target audience. I've often said the target audience thing is feels a bit awkward saying audience, because like you said on the Kick-Ass Employer Brands, podcast, that people aren't waiting to see recruitment ads, aren't waiting to see employer brand content. I'd argue that, audience isn't there, and you don't find an audience, you actually build one, but there's lots of talk about understanding the audience. So I think it often is seen quite skin deep, isn't it? It's demographics, but it doesn't go into the whole psychographic, space. So what role does psychology play in really understanding the audience?
Well, I think, like I alluded to earlier, I think I agree with your point about kind of audiences being earned, not necessarily just there for you. You have to earn your audience's attention. You can't just pump out an ad because you go, I understand them, therefore they're going to watch it. You need to give them a reason to watch it. I think, like I alluded to earlier, there's the demographic, or the kind of the surface level characteristics that for centuries as human beings we've been identifying as. I started off by saying I was born in the UK, but I'm from Ireland. I identify as Irish, a very surface level characteristic of my nationality rather than my interests, my behaviors, my motivations, what drives me as a human being. And I think that those types of things are things that we're starting to look at more and more, is like what's my attitude towards certain things. So using behavioral science software and actual macro level data that we can then transpose into campaigns that gives us the ability to actually tap into deeper human emotions and sentiment, rather than just saying, actually, we're targeting people in London to come work for client X, or we need people in the Northeast to join company Y. It goes, actually, we need people who demonstrate the ability to be resilient, or to that value social connection in the workplace. And then how can we tap into that through the content that we're creating, which will then make sure that they're a good company fit. So it's bringing it down a level, but also giving it the ability to translate back to things that we can target with. Because I think too often you can get into, I think you said at the start, you can get too deep into the science and forget about the art of creation. The science and the insight should drive the briefs and the targeting criteria, but the art still needs to play a big role in conjunction with the insight and the science to make sure that we actually can create something. We want to, I suppose our job as strategists, insight professionals, is to create the playground or the canvas for people to draw on based on who we need to speak to and what we're trying to achieve, but we still need to leave the room for creativity within that as well.
Definitely, there's that kind of importance in taking those creative leaps, isn't it? And I think that can be kind of hamstrung by too much data.
Yeah.
And actually, and thank goodness, this is easier to do it now more than ever, is being able to kick things out of theory and out of the sandbox and properly test ideas, and going back to the empathy thing, actually putting it in front of people, in a real world situation, and seeing what comes back, and then being able to optimize on that, on that basis, because you spend lots of time hypothesizing and doing a research, but ultimately, the person who will be able to tell you if something's working or not is the people that actually see your content.
And I think one of the things, I don't think I've mentioned the word yet, and it's often seen as, I suppose, a dirty word in the world of business and wider, is, I suppose, influence. Because the ability to influence from a psychological perspective is one of the most important you can have in any aspect of life. And it's not about coercion or control, which are probably two, when influence gets taken to an extreme. But any good communicator, and by that I mean an individual or a brand who communicates, should be able to influence through their communication. And psychology can allow you to understand how you can influence certain groups or certain audiences or certain partners or organizations or audiences, whatever term you want to use, by understanding the principles of influencing others, tapping into their motivations and behaviors, like I said. But I think the ability to influence is one of the things that psychology teaches you, but also you can learn by recognizing the characteristics, the traits of those around you, and learning from what goes before. I think you alluded to the Guinness talk that I did a couple of months ago. And one of the things that the Guinness marketing team have made I suppose there's two things that stick to mind from Guinness. One, they always say the quality of our advertising and branding needs to meet the quality of our product. So we can't just be pumping out things that don't match our brand equity. And the second is, before we think about the future, we learn from the past. And too many presentations don't focus, or too many, I suppose, you wrap up the year of what we've achieved. It's like, oh, okay, we've done this really well, but this is an opportunity for the future. But what actually have we learned? Why has this been a success? And what can we also learn from where we might not have had as much success to then influence what we're going to do in the future? And I think that's something that as an industry we can get slightly better at, is learning from what's gone before to influence what comes in the future, from a brand, but also from, I suppose, a more tangible advertising perspective as well. If you can tell every brand how to do it, you'll be a millionaire. I think the key thing, I suppose, about earning attention is the two-way street and the two-way conversation that often, I think I alluded to it earlier, that often we forget about as advertisers, communicators, marketeers. We often communicate out and wait rather than giving people a reason to want to have a conversation. And I think a lot of the conversations that we're having with clients at the moment is, how can you have a conversation with your audience to actually not only earn their attention, but also go a step further and go earn their trust, earn their loyalty, because attention can only be the first stage of something. If we're only focused, as I suppose, in our world around attention, then we go, well, okay, what's next? Do we want more attention? And I think attention becomes an ego thing. rather than something that actually leads to an outcome that's beneficial for both you as the communicator, but also the communicated, and go, actually, okay, we've earned their attention. There's a really, a humorous ad that really taps into their sense of humor, and okay, but what next? We haven't actually asked them to do anything, or they haven't subscribed, or what's the next thing? And I think I always think about it, if you can earn someone's attention, you need to then do something to earn an action from them. And if you try and do too many things at the one time, you're going to lose them, and you're going to complicate what you're doing. But I think, yeah, you can acquire attention, you can acquire an audience, but you can't necessarily then earn attention and then just leave it there. We get so many conversations around how do we build awareness? And it's like, well, why do you want to build awareness? What's the thing that you're looking to build awareness on? Why do you want more attention on your brand? And it's like, okay, well, the so what? And the psychology then becomes, okay, earn attention, but then the so what can't just be an ego play. It can't just be someone going, right, well, we've had 1 million people see our ads, so job well done from a brand advertising perspective. The brand advertising and the short-term marketing, or the kind of the conversion marketing, need to work in tandem. Too often we hear about them working in isolation, and it's actually, the brand awareness marketing should drive your short-term marketing as well. So I think it's a cycle that we probably need to go through, that we don't necessarily always do in our space to a high enough level, I would say.
That trust is very difficult to achieve because of the amount of work that it can take,
I think also how easy it is to lose. I think any child or any young person has probably heard that their parent at some point say, "Oh, trust is the hardest thing to gain, but the easiest thing to lose." And I think that, again, going back to one of the questions that I think we were going to speak about was around how can people who don't go to uni or anything learn psychology. It's simple human interaction like that. Actually, you make one mistake or you do the wrong thing, people will remember that far more than they will the 10 smaller things that you did for them before that. And it's simple, I suppose, human nature that we've all experienced, and learning from those experiences is really important as well, because trust, as you said, takes time to build up, but then in an instant can be gone. So it's a continuous journey.
It's true. Actually, it's interesting. I think losing the trust is definitely a challenge, but I think if you as an organization is sincerely seen as being putting the effort in, then there's a bit more leniency, and people can forgive. I think, and there's this is a whole other space, but you look at the kind of the psychology of why Mr. Beast is so popular. One of the things is because people see the amount of effort he puts into his productions. And if there are any indiscretions, whether micro or massive, then I think there's more leeway to let that kind of thing lie. But then that points the thing about longevity in terms of, and consistency in terms of kind of building that trust, and then maintaining
authenticity within that as well. You said about obviously Mr. Beast or any organization that doesn't try and be something they're not. I think the ability to hold your hands up and say, do you know what, we don't always get it right, is the fundamental human characteristic that we all value in other people, no matter who we are. But often we don't see in organizations because we're too scared of the outcome of that, whether that be shareholders, whether that be customers, whether that be potential employees. But if there's the honesty and integrity that actually, when you do make a mistake, that you can hold your hands up. And I think, I was watching Painkiller, which is the new show about Purdue Pharma on Netflix. And I think one of the things that stuck with me, knowing that we were going to be chatting today, was actually when they made mistakes, they weren't open. They lied. And if you see, you wouldn't be friends with someone who does that. So why can we, as people in employer branding, whether we be in-house or agency, why can we expect other people to want to engage with us if they can see through that as well?
Yeah. I suppose it all boils down to the building rapport ultimately.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to the employer branding, employer marketing world, it's rapport is, I think maybe it's underestimated because of the time it can take to build a rapport, because there's a demand of, where we need to raise awareness, as soon as possible, or we, need to be able to filling this talent pipeline in the future?
Yeah, I think it's just a really interesting dynamic, isn't it? And I think rapport, conversation, kind of very similar themes around actually a two-way street. And how can we have that two-way street, which you even think from a consumer perspective, we have two-way conversations with brands all the time, whether it's buying a pair of shoes, whether it's feedback on the product, whether it's, and we're starting to get better at it. We're starting to have more two-way conversations. There's a lot more of it. You see in internal comms and in employee experience, there's a lot more two-way dialogue, but from a brand building perspective with people who may not engage with you, how can you have that two-way conversation? What would you like to see more of? How can we engage with you more? And I think that can only lead to better outcomes for the industry itself.
Lovely. Well, look, I mean, there's plenty more we could chat about, but I think let's finish off with, are there any kind of tips you give somebody, things that they could maybe read or things that they could do to start being a little bit more psychologist in what they're doing when it comes to building teams for, employer branding projects or, building employer branding content and experiences?
I suppose the first thing is listen. And it seems easy, but listen to what's going on around you. Listen to how people communicate. Listen to how people respond when you are communicating. Because I think some of the first things we try and often do when we're in a team situation is project, again, going back to that word I used earlier, project our personality rather than understanding the dynamic within the room and the role that others want to play. It's not about trying to be someone you're not, but it's about understanding what's in the room first before you then try and be something different. I think I read a really good book. I'm trying to find the name of it. I'm typing it in now as we speak. And it was there was what I did at uni, which was a group dynamics book, which was really interesting about how different people behave in different situations. I'm trying to find the actual name of it. It had group dynamic. Reading the Room, I think, was the title of the book.
Okay.
And it was for a leadership book that I read about 10 years ago about how the best leaders can read the room the best. And it was a fascinating read about that. I also, even things like some of Malcolm Gladwell's books are a great starting point for someone who has an interest in psychology, but maybe not the degree or the background from an academic perspective, because they explain some really important principles really well. And one of the ones that always sticks to mind is, I suppose, the person who goes to Harvard versus the person who goes to a different university, even though they've achieved the same in high school. They rarely achieve the same thing because of the environment that they're placed in. So if you go to a larger organization, your psychological adaptation will have to be very different to if you're in a smaller organization, and understanding, going back to what I said about understanding the environment that we're in. So I think they'd be some of the things I'd say. I think there's countless things that you can learn, even like I said at the very beginning, listening to others, but also understanding their position. So asking questions, I think you alluded to that as well, not just, again, projecting your own view. So I think they'd be some of the things that I would say. And I think don't be afraid to ask the questions of, okay, have you been in this position before? Is there anything else that we could do? How did we do the last time? Things like that actually increase your understanding and situational awareness of how to act when certain things happen as well. The situational understanding can help you influence in many different situations. Rather, if you rely on your strength of personality, you're going to find yourself in situations where you can't influence or you can't manage the situation in the right way. But if you understand the situations where you may be slightly more comfortable in versus ones that you're uncomfortable in, you can learn some of the things that may help you in those uncomfortable situations by, I suppose, again, showing empathy to yourself and also self-understanding, which I think some of us don't always do. And none of us ever get it right. There's always times where you think back and go, oh, I could have handled that situation a lot better, which is probably leaning too much on the individual characteristic rather than the situational characteristic that you find yourself in.
If anyone wants to, get in touch with you, then you can find you on LinkedIn, and
please feel free to connect.
Go from there.
Perfect. Thanks,
cheers.
Chris.
Have a good day, and
you too.
Cheers. Bye.